What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show here on Sherdog.com. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Ian O'Neill as we preview the very good show over in the Singapore Indoor Stadium as One Championship 160 goes down. That's a bit of a mouthful if I can get that out properly. 160 goes down. 2 title fights on this card and some good... I wouldn't say up and comers even, but some good guys kind of in their prime and some good fights. Well, I know the two of us have looked into this card pretty heavily here, Ian. And overall, it's not a bad card. I'm looking forward to kind of breaking it down here. Very, very interesting time for One Championship as well. Obviously, they have 160 coming up. Then they have the Amazon cards, which are going to be starting as well the day after this and going on for a while. So it's a very, very interesting time for One Championship, and I'm looking forward to getting into it here. Ian, let's start off straight away and let's talk about the main event, which is the rematch between Rae Yoon and Christian Lee. They fought back in September of last year, and this is obviously a rematch for the title again. I went back and I watched that fight today, and I'll be honest, I thought the wrong guy won. I thought Christian Lee won that fight. Now the judging in One Championship is a bit different from the judging that we have here in Ireland, where I am, and Canada, where you are, in the US and the UK and all of those places. So it's a little bit different. Look, it was a close fight. It was a very interesting fight. I know you've gone back and watched it as well. What way did you see it, and what did you kind of take from the fight, I suppose, apart from maybe the winner and the loser?
Yeah, I actually thought that Lee deserved to take home the title on the night as well. Obviously one judged the fight in its entirety, and I looked at it through the lens of judging like that, and still I had it scored for Lee. Right tight until the end. I thought, it was a very intriguing stylistic matchup where, Lee always looks to come in and mix up his striking and his takedowns quite a bit. The unfortunate thing with Oak is he has absolutely sensational takedown defense. And if you do manage to get him taken down, he pops straight back up. So I think that was kind of the story for the first half of the fight. I know that both of them traded at times. Both of them were hurt during the duration of the fight. I think Lee was forced to change his game plan about halfway through when he kind of realized he was exerting too much energy to kind of maintain his takedown attempts. And like we said, Oak is unbelievable. That was the biggest takeaway, I think, that I took from watching Oak back. I watched his fight against Eddie Alvarez as well. And his takedown offense against Eddie Alvarez was unbelievable. And it kind of forces Oak will he'll allow those takedown attempts and kind of maybe to kind of counteract his opponent's attempts, getting them tired, forcing them to strike. And he has some big shots when the fight does remain standing. Then, he's hurt Eddie. He hurt Eddie Alvarez. He hurt Lee on multiple occasions. But I think overall, when it came to it, Lee was tiring out towards the end of that first fight with Oak. But ultimately, he did hurt him with that right hand at the end in the 5th round. And I thought that was probably the shot that should have done enough for him to take the fight. But stylistically, this is a great matchup. And the second fight is going to be a great stylistic matchup too. And both these guys have been in there. They've done the 25 minutes. They'll have downloaded all their data, and they'll be looking to come back with maybe new approaches and new game plans. It'll be interesting to see how the second fight goes down. I see that first fight exactly the way you see it, even down to the late right hand kind of winning the fight for Christian. Now, he didn't win it, and I think even watching it again this morning, I think Oak was a little bit shocked even when he got his hand raised. But I said it was interesting. Look, these two guys, I think you described them pretty well there. Oak, very, very good takedown defense. He's loose on the feet. He loves throwing those flying knees. Even those knees in the clinch when he gets in there, he's very good at throwing them. He's a great jab when he throws it. But he doesn't throw it often enough for me. Doesn't use it enough to keep guys kind of off him from getting into that clinch, and he has to show that very good takedown defense, because I don't think he uses that jab enough. But if he can use that, like we're looking to the keys from the first fight coming into the second fight, throwing that jab a little bit more, I think, is a massive key for Oak coming here to keep him off him. But he did really well in that first fight. I think he bided his time.
he just bided his time so well. And as you mentioned there, and it's one of the things I have in my notes here, Christian Lee tired at almost exactly the halfway point of the fight. He did really well with an early takedown. He was smart with it. The takedowns as well allow Christian Lee to throw those big shots, that big right hand down the middle, even the late right hand, which you mentioned there. It gets him into that clinch. It gets him the fight to the ground. He almost got the rear naked choke at the end of that second round, but it's the third round, fourth round, he looked tired, did get a bit of a second wind, and finished relatively strongly, although I think there was portions of the fight, portions of the fifth round as well, or most of the fifth round even, where Oak was winning it. Look, I think it's very simple for both guys coming into this second fight what they need to do. I think Oak needs to less clinching, more striking, and Lee probably needs less striking, more clinching. And when he has more striking to land those big shots like he landed, he has shown in the first fight that, even though Oak is looked at maybe as the striker, Lee probably had the more powerful strikes in that first fight, or the most close to finishing strikes, if you want to put it that way, in that first fight, even though he's maybe not as as highly thought of in that realm as his opponent. He is very much like an old school wrestle boxer and very, very strong with it. We talked about in recent times, Ian, and it's been really something that's come up a lot recently, where guys don't tire as much if they're fighting in their realm. Like, he could do probably 10 rounds of wrestling and, kind of wrestle boxing. But when it's turned into pushing a guy back and having to close that distance, I think he tires a lot, and having to fight on the feet, he's going to tire a lot as well. So I think he needs to stop that. If he gets an extra bit of wrestling, or maybe the wrestling comes easier to Christian Lee this time, I think his cardio will last longer. I think he'll dominate the fight longer, and maybe it won't be as close this time. I think the methods of victory for him coming into the second fight are maybe clearer or easier than Oak. Would you agree with that, or who do you see? Even though we both think Oak won the first time, I think Lee would probably win the second one.
Yeah, like you said, we both thought Lee won the first fight, and he made a couple of mistakes in that fight where I think he tried to force the action a little bit too much. Both of them were dropped in round 3, and it was actually Christian Lee's shot that landed. I believe it was an overhand right that he kind of caught Oak coming in, where he dropped him, sat him down, and was actually in side control and in full control before he went for an anaconda choke, which Oak was able to kind of scramble and break free. And I thought that was a little bit of a mistake. I was like, watching back the second time, I was like, oh, he'll be looking back at that. He'll be regretting that decision, rather than maybe just settling for that position, settling for the side control, landing a bit of damage, and maybe comfortably winning the round as well. But we have to remember Christian Lee, 24 years of age, very young as a fighter, very experienced though as a fighter too. But also that experience of being in the cage for 25 minutes, I believe, will stand to him in this rematch as well. He hadn't been, I don't believe, until that fight in there for longer than 3 rounds, and had only gone 3 rounds once in his career. So he was going into new territory altogether, going into the championship round. So, like you said, one thing Lee has to capitalize on is making the takedowns count, landing heavy off the clinch, because there's no doubt that he will get Oak in positions to take him down against the cage, because I don't think Oak is defensively great on the feet, and he kind of backs himself up against the cage. And I was like, that's a big mistake, until I saw how good he was at getting back up, and how good he was at taking or defending those takedowns. So it's kind of like maybe he's leading his opponents into a false sense of security to try and attempt the takedown so that he can defend, make them tired, and then land his attacks. But I think what Oak will bring to the table in this fight is similar to what will see in the first fight between the two. I think coming into the second one, I'm expecting to see a few changes from Lee. I think the experience of that first fight will help him a lot. And my expectations would be for another relatively close fight. But I'm kind of leaning towards Lee getting the nod in this second fight between the two.
Yeah, I would agree as well, and I think I went mad there earlier saying we both thought Christian Lee won the first fight, and I think I think he'll win again. I think that'd be my prediction as well. I agree with what you're saying there about, Oak reminds me a little bit of Anthony Pettis, the way he kind of pushes himself against the cage. If he can stop doing that, he's a great chance. But then if he doesn't do that, does that open up more takedowns? Does that stop Lee tiring a bit? Like, it looked, and I agree with what you said there, it looked like his game plan was to tire Lee out a little bit. Don't want to go full Dominic Cruz with McGregor and Habib or anything now, but you know, whether it was his game plan or not, it worked, and that did happen. It'll be interesting to see if that happens again, but I don't think it will. I think it'll be Christian Lee clear this time, and I think he'll regain the title there. And you know what, we could be back here in another couple of months talking about the third meeting between the two of them. That should be fun. We have another title fight here as well, Ian. Tan Lee versus Tang Kai. I watched some of the two of these lads this morning. Obviously, no, I've seen Tan Lee around for a while now. Regular viewers, I suppose, of One Championship would have seen Tang Kai as well, but I've been very impressed watching both of them. I think Tan Lee, the one standout thing about that guy is power. He has serious power. He's a southpaw, but he switches stances. They said in the commentary he's a taekwondo magician or something like that, I think it was, and that's how I'd probably describe him as well. He's never gone to a decision. He also trains with Ryan Hall, so you know, he's good on the ground as well. I was watching one of his fights where, where the fight, it was the Gary Tonin fight, wasn't it? In his last fight, where he went to the ground and Gary Tonin almost had him in leg lock. But who would you want to train with to defend leg locks like that? Only Ryan Hall. And then, you know, me talking about jiu-jitsu all the time, when he did knock out Gary Tonin, he immediately became kind of half a hero of mine just because he furthered his arguments. I like Gary Tonin's style as well, and I like guys transition over from jiu-jitsu. But on the funny side of it, it was great, and a very, very good win there, and a very, very good fighter. And his opponent, Tang Kai, what I love about Tang Kai is the jab. Oh my God, he has an unbelievable jab, and anyone who knows me and knows my analysis of fights and fighters knows the jab is my favorite thing. It's so good. I describe him as
I want to see how I have something in my notes. I'm curious to see if you I described him as a sniper. He's a sniper on the outside, and he's waiting for those openings to land those shots. Do you know what I wrote down? Speed kickboxer, which is pretty much the same thing. That's exactly what it is. But it's funny though. There was someone recently, and I couldn't think of it today. I was trying to think of it, who transitions as well from kind of the kickboxing to the takedowns. Like, I went back and watched that Edward Kelly fight. Took him down multiple times. Like, this guy is a really good wrestler and a really good kickboxer. I am so impressed with him. He's a really good athlete as well. And it feels like Tang Kai is one of these guys that I guarantee you a lot of people who maybe, you know, only watch the UFC or only watch Bellator or whatever it might be, are probably thinking, these two lads, you know, fighting out here or whatever. These lads are good fighters, and I like Tan Lee. People know Tan Lee, but he's brilliant. Honestly, like, kind of looking and doing some research and watching tape back on all the fighters, this fight here is massive, one that I am really looking forward to seeing. Yeah. Just a stylistic clash between. Look, I think with Tan Lee, One FC or One Championships, they want to see action. They'll have the referees warning, and if there's no action or any lulls in action, and shout out to them, even under YouTube, they don't even record the feeling out process. It's straight into the action. They'll miss the first half of the rounds, but when Tan Lee is in there, there's no worries about that, because he's coming forward and he is striking all the time. His fight with Martin Nguyen was unbelievable. The two of them absolutely went at hell for leather, landing huge shots. I thought what Tan Lee did so excellently well in the Martin Nguyen fight was he fought so well on the back foot and kind of lured Nguyen into kind of his world, where Nguyen was moving forward. He was waiting on the back foot, looking to counter all the shots. And he showcased an unbelievable chin. He showcased how dangerous he is with his punches in the pocket. His feinting on the outside was unbelievable. And then, we saw him in there against a couple of other guys as well, where he looked really good on the front foot. He came over from LFA. Actually, Tan Lee is actually an American-based fighter, like you said, training with Ryan Hall. After losing to Kevin Aguilar, who's now in the UFC. But since he's come into One FC, he has set that division on fire. knocking everybody out serious, willing to get in there, throw a shot, land a shot. And just, it's going to be interesting for me to see how he approaches the Tang Kai fight, because it's the interesting little thing in these one championship fights is the press for action. And it kind of forces it, and it kind of takes away the natural kind of flow or the natural chemistry of some fights. And with Tang Kai, I think if he had his way, he would wait on the outside and look to counter all the time. But, you know, he has to press the action, and it'll be interesting to see which one of these guys actually fights on the front foot and wants to take up the lead in this fight. I'm going to imagine that it's going to be Tan Lee that's going to do that. And I'm very curious to see how Tang Kai reacts to that. I would be very wary of how Tan Lee leaves himself open coming in with wild strikes, because Tang Kai has an absolutely unbelievable left hook. It's like he's just waiting to get that shot off. And when he does, and if it lands flush, it's lights out and it's game over for anybody.
100%. I think that part of it is very interesting, what you said about, I know we've seen the Dana White Contender Series as well, where they don't necessarily have the warning, but it's like you go out and you have to finish or else Dana White won't sign you, you know? And I don't know whether I like or hate that, to be honest, but that's the reality of what we have. Do you know what is interesting here? I would agree with you that Tang Kai might be adversely affected by it, but I also think he mightn't, because Tan Lee might fight so, like, you know, heavy in terms of volume that there might be no warnings that he can fight his normal game, because his opponent is actually fighting a more volume heavy game. And as you the point you made there about will Tan Lee get caught coming in, that's where I think this fight. I'm picking Tang Kai here to win this fight, and the bet odds aren't out here or anything yet. But I really like him. Like, I don't think I've watched a fighter in a while that I like as much as this guy watching his fights coming in. I think he'll win the fight. Who are you picking on to win? I'm going for Tang Kai. I think he'll get that jab going. I think he'll win the fight.
I think because his overall striking game is way better technically. His shot selection and how accurate he is with his shot selection, you know, he's not going to be throwing shots unless he feels he's 100% confident of those shots landing. Whereas I feel that Tan Lee kind of will kind of throw a couple of wild ones, maybe miss a few, maybe try and take one so he can get off his shots as well. And I don't know how well that's going to try to transcribe in here against Tang Kai, who just really has a cerebral approach when it comes to his striking, and just a really class stylistic matchup. And I'm kind of leaning towards Tang Kai as well, just to kind of get the better of the two. He has like ridiculous power in his shots, in his kicks and in his punches as well. And, you know, it's not necessarily raw power that gets him the knockout wins that he has achieved so far. It's more so the timing and the accuracy and you know, where he gets himself in and out of the pocket where to get off those shots. They just all kind of intertwine greatly, and you know, the result is he leaves guys like one shot for many guys is enough. But if he does get a guy hurt, he shows some great killer instinct too, and lands really accurate ground and pounds, and those are the main things that impressed me between the two. And just for the latter points that I've made, that's why I kind of am leaning towards Tang Kai in this fight.
100%. Two very, very good title fights here. I'm looking forward to them. There's 3 other fights on the card, and we'll run through them quickly here. Amir Khan versus Keanu Subba. Watching Khan today, he's very tall for the division, throws those snap kicks. I would describe him as maybe a long boxer. He's very fast with the strikes after kind of slow movements. Remind you a little bit tactically of Yoel Romero. You know, slow and fast. Leg is very open to kick though, and we've seen that in a few of his fights. He's kind of got knocked down and hit hard with that. He adds in a takedown a bit at a time too. I think that his biggest issue, he throws too many head kicks. He tries to spam with it. When it does land, it's very good, but I think he throws too many of them. It's going to get him tired, but he is strong in the clinch when he gets there. Subba, on the other hand, he sits down and he strikes. switches those stances all the time. He's also very strong in the clinch for me. That's a part of the fight where I think it could be won and lost. Subba wants to get the fight to the ground though. His body locks, he gets trips, he's strong on top, his shoulder pressure is very good. He lands well when he has that control as well, and I think that's a major factor here. And he looks for the submissions as well. I think maybe this is the type of one where if Subba can get the fight to the ground, I think he'll win it, and I think he probably will. But if Amir Khan can kind of keep it on the feet and make it a rhythmic fight, if you want to say that, and land his fast shots, he could win it too. It's a 50-50 type of fight for me. I'm not sure when the betting lines come out in this who will be favourite, but it's an interesting fight. It's not, look, both guys are well rounded, I would say, but I think Subba kind of needs to get this fight to the ground, and Khan needs to kind of keep the fight as a 15-minute kickboxing match. How do you see it?
Yeah, pretty similar, to be honest, as well. Looking back at Amir Khan's last fight against Ryogo Takahashi. Actually, looking back at a lot of these fights, poor Takahashi was on the receiving end of a lot of damage from these fighters that we're talking about. And Amir Khan, but Takahashi started well against Amir Khan, who I feel starts a little bit too slow.
Agree, yeah.
And it's something that he kind of will need to correct in his game. Another thing that kind of raised the red flag for me in Amir Khan's game, especially coming in against a guy like Subba as well, is his willingness to accept bottom position and how open he is, and his inability to tie up his opponent when he is on his back, because he ate a lot of bombs from Takahashi in that first round. And I believe, he started only to exert his will in that fight when Takahashi faded a little bit in round 2. So Subba is definitely not going to fade, and he's going to maintain that forward pressure. He's going to be looking to close the distance to take this fight down. Like you said, I would give the advantage overall on the feet to Amir Khan. But he's going to have to be very, very cute in the way he throws his strikes here. He's going to have to. He did impress me in the clinch. He is strong against the cage, in the clinch against the cage, and he was trying to press the action in rounds 2 and rounds 3 against the cage against Takahashi. Obviously felt that he was stronger there in the clinch. What he's going to have to do here against Subba is, if Subba does want to close the distance and initiate that clinch, he's going to have to come at him hard with knees to the body. He's going to have to try and punish Subba to kind of say to him, okay, you want to come in and you want to take the fight to the ground. I'm going to make you pay to the best of my ability. And but honestly, I think that Subba is good enough to close the distance, good enough to stay out of trouble in the clinch. I think, he has a good body lock takedown. He has a good inside trip. He has a good outside trip. Those are all things that Amir Khan is going to have to worry about in that clinch position. And if Subba gets on top, he is very, very strong on top, always looking to land damage as well. He creates scrambles very well in the grappling department as well, and always capitalizes, if he ends up on his back, he'll be able to scramble into top position, very, very wiry on the ground. And it's something that Amir Khan is going to have to be very wary of in this fight. Interesting stylistic matchup. Would kind of be leaning towards Subba to get the nod in this one.
I would tend to agree 100%. The heavyweight fight then between Paul Elliott and Martin Batur. Paul Elliott is, if anyone sees the things up behind me there on the wall, they'll know I like Paul Elliott. A heavyweight wonder boy is how I describe him. Now he went in and also his nickname is the King of the North, which it should be the King in the North per se, but I've been rewatching Game of Thrones recently and I'm like, so that's absolutely brilliant. Now he got knocked out badly against Ji-Won Kang in his one championship debut back in March in 58 seconds, but anyone who watched that fight will know that he just went hell for leather, throwing everything. What was it, a wheel kick he started out with? He's throwing
speed on that too. I was watching that fight back and I was like, oh, I nearly got a fright myself when I seen him throw.
I wasn't expecting it.
For the size of him, he is
massive.
Crazy fast.
Yeah.
That was on my notes. It's very, very, very fast. One kind of, in that fight, I don't know, did he at the moment get to him on his debut? I thought he was trying to force the action a little bit too much. overcommitting on shots, winging his hooks, winging his punches, not setting them up.
Which is funny for a guy with such good technique, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think it was the moment.
He didn't throw a jab once in the fight. You know what I mean? And that to me was like, oh, this is not good. And he's coming in here against Martin Batur, and he's not going to want to be doing the same thing against Batur in this fight either, because Batur is a guy who will happily wait on the outside to try and counter those wild shots. And with Elliott as well, I thought that the difference between Elliott in that fight with Wukong, or with G1, excuse me, was the difference in the result. It was Elliott, he went with wild shots, whereas G1 kept his shots tight and kept his chin down.
Shots, yeah.
And he ended up clipping Elliott, and Elliott was landing shots as well, but it was that technique. Keeping that chin down can help an awful lot, especially in the heavyweight division as well, where one shot can change it all.
That's why we don't see fighters like him in the heavyweight division, because they're not going to last very long. Now, I do think his style can be effective in the heavyweight division, but he needs to hold it back a little bit, because if he doesn't get the knockout early, A, he's either going to get knocked out himself, or B, he'll probably tire and he'll end up losing late. But he's just so exciting to watch. Anytime there's a Paul Elliott fight now, I'll be watching. And Martin Batur, he's a big, tall guy. He throws lovely high kicks, lovely low kicks, picks his moments very well as well. And you know what? We talked about Elliott being fast. I think for a guy so big, Martin Batur is very, very fast as well. And as you said, it's 58 seconds in the G1 fight for Paul Elliott, and he kind of lost the head a little bit. I'd be interested to see in this fight with, I would say, probably even a better opponent here in Batur, or a different sort of opponent anyway in Batur. I'd be interested to see what the tactics are, what the game plan is, because if it's to come in and just go all out, I think we'll all enjoy it, but it probably won't be great for his health, one, and his career going forward too. So I'd be interested to see how this fight goes. I think it will be fun, Don. I'm very much. It
will. I think that with Batur, it's kind of probably going to be a thing for him where he has to kind of weather that storm early. And, he has a tendency to kind of sit back and not really press the action all that much, which may suit him a little bit in other fights. But at ONE FC, luckily for him, Elliott probably will oblige and attack, but he's not going to be able to rest on his laurels in there, because the ref will be in asking for action straight away. With Batur as well, I'm just curious to see. He does have a little bit of grappling in his back pocket if he needs it. Maybe level change and shooting down, getting an early takedown might take some of the steam off of what Elliott might be bringing at him at the start of the fight. That's something I would be looking at as well. And I think that Batur's patience is going to pay a lot of dividends in this fight. He won't want to exchange all that much with Elliott in the pocket, but when he does find his range, when he does find his timing, he's not afraid to attack, and that's when he becomes dangerous. So, I can really see Elliott coming out here again, and it might be just his style, a kill or be killed kind of an attitude from Elliott, because I think at the end of the day, if the fight goes longer, his chances will decrease in getting the win.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I'm going to pick him now. I'm going to pick Elliott to win that. Who's your pick? Who are you going for in a word?
I'm going to go with Batur just for the sake of the argument.
Fair enough. The last fight then, I'll just quickly run through this. We won't say too long on it. Thales, Nakassu against Agasa. There wasn't that much tape on Nakassu out there, if I'm being honest. I found one fight of his, and he looked like, I would describe him as a plan A jiu-jitsu guy. And he's fighting a wrestler coming in here who shoots, and likes to immediately shoot, has a good left hook, and I would say Agasa has better striking. So if it turns into one of those fights, one guy is a wrestler, one guy's a jiu-jitsu guy, could turn into a kickboxing match, and the winner of that, I think, will probably be Agasa. I think Agasa is one of those guys, you look at him, and he's a good athlete, looks strong, looks quick, looks like he has a bit about him everywhere, but is kind of missing the middle bits in mixed martial arts. And these are two very much learning kind of guys and coming over from other sports who kind of need, I think, big improvements. But it's good matchmaking. I think both of them are on a similar sort of level. I think Agasa will win the fight. I think it'll be kept on the feet. But if Nakassu can get the fight to the ground, I think he can definitely get the submission. But I'll go for Agasa on that one. Who'd you like in that one? Would you like the jiu-jitsu of Thales or the wrestling of Agasa? And wrestling and a bit of striking, maybe.
Most of all, I like your prediction that, when we get a jiu-jitsu artist versus a wrestler, it's likely going to end up in a striking battle.
Definitely.
And, anything could happen as well. But I probably would pretty much be on the same lines as yourself. I feel that Agasa is probably a little bit more well-rounded overall. He will probably get the job done on the night as well. But what I'm hoping for in this fight is, not to see anyone's jiu-jitsu be nullified by wrestling. What I want to see is plenty of striking, plenty of excitement. And if one championships and the referees have their way, there'll be no kind of stalling or no any of that kind of crack going on anyway. So it's likely we'll see some exciting striking exchanges in this fight as well.
100%. There is a bit of kickboxing in this as well. Let me just pull it up here while we're talking about it. They have the flyweight Muay Thai Grand Prix. They have the bantamweight Grand Prix is on it as well. I know a couple of the Fairtex lads are on this. Anything that stands out to you in the kickboxing? I know you're a bigger kickboxing fan to be, but there are, from what I'm led to believe, there are some very meaningful matches on this card over the weekend as well. And there is a submission grappling matchup as well. Hinata Kanutu versus Tommy Langer as well. So anything stand out for you there, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, look at whether they've meant to kind of develop this as one championships as well. But I can promise you this, like from what I've seen in previous events, some of the best kickboxing or Muay Thai fights that you're going to see right now are in one championship right now. They're kind of setting the bar when it comes to getting these well-established Thai boxers over and competing in the cage. We got some Chinese fighters. Jonathan Hegarty is fighting on the same day on the Amazon Prime card as well. If you're not familiar with these guys or you don't recognize the names and you are a big striking fan, my recommendation is to tune in and watch these fights. You might not always see some devastating knockouts. You might not see some wild brawls, but what you will see is probably the highest technical ability when it comes to striking that's out there right now. To be honest, they're up there with the likes of Glory and the likes of all those big kickboxing promotions with the fights to produce and with the matchups. They're matching one championships are matching the very best kind of strikers against the very best strikers here. So, some beautiful, like I'm a guy, obviously everybody loves a brawl. Everyone loves guys throwing leather, but I really enjoy watching a really technical striking battle as well, where lots of feints, lots of movement, and that's what ONE FC have produced down through previous cards, and they'll continue to do it. So don't be thrown off by the long names that everyone struggles to kind of to say. I'm not even going to try and attempt to name anyone on it, but all I can say is that anytime I've tuned in, I've always enjoyed any of the Muay Thai or the kickboxing fights that one throw on. And
the best thing about this card as well is starting at 12:30 Irish time. So that's in the
a little bit earlier for me, unfortunately. I'll be up at the wee hour of 5 a.m. But look, I get all the main I'll get all the main MMA action at prime time, so I can't complain.
I get one from one. There's lots of one in this one, so I'm looking forward to that. And we will leave it there. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. Ian, thank you very much. O'Neill MMA over on Twitter. Catch him there. Catch him over on severemma.com. The Owl Triangle, if you like Irish MMA, if you want a little bit more of MMA, all about Irish MMA, catch the Owl Triangle over there as well, everywhere you get podcasts. Ian, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you as well all for listening. My name is Sheehan from Sherdog.com, and I will see you all next time.